Talk Radio 930 WTAD. Welcome back to the morning meeting. Brian Nichols and Sean Seacrease alongside. All right, we continue this morning with Michigan Congressman Thaddeus McCotter, also presidential candidate, and he joins us this morning on the morning meeting. Congressman, good morning.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for taking the time. All right, well, where the heck do we stand? I mean, that's kind of an open-ended question, but that's what everybody's asking.
Well, I'm personally standing against what I believe to be a tax trap. When you look at the bill, right on its face, you can see the American public knows that it is imbalanced to give a $2 trillion debt hike over 1 year in exchange for $2 trillion in cuts over 10 years. You cannot bind the hands, as Senator Lee has said, of future Congresses and guarantee those cuts. Secondly, if you look at the bill, the super committee, if it does not agree, if it deadlocks, it goes to the automatic cuts. And underneath there, they have 50% of those automatic cuts right off the bat come out of the military. They've also taken out of there certain things that cannot be touched. So if you're a Republican on that super committee staring at an equal number of Democrats, their argument's going to be either you give us tax hikes or the military gets it. And I cannot support that, especially in a time of war.
So there is no compromise then, as far as you're concerned.
What they've done is they've backloaded it. As you know, this is a two-step process. First step is the $900 billion in exchange for $917 billion in exchange for the $900 billion debt limit increase. And this, again, the debt limit increase is immediate, and those cuts are supposed to come over 10 years. And then you have a second bite at the apple, which is when the super committee is supposed to find like $1.5 trillion. And if they don't, then the sequestration, the automatic cuts come in, and that's where the part gets really, really dangerous.
Now, I'm looking at this PowerPoint that John Boehner, Speaker of the House, put out last night, and to me, it looks like he's framed this as being the second coming of cut, cap, and balance. But if it was the second coming of cut, cap, and balance, I find it hard to believe that anybody would, outside of House Republicans, would vote for it. And of course, now you're saying that you won't vote for it. So, I mean, is this in any way, shape, or form similar to cut, cap, and balance?
Well, I think it's similar in the principles. It's just a question of whether they were implemented and be able to be achieved, and I don't think so. Again, when you come and look at that sequestration process, it's been argued that this is what we used before, but they've also done tinkering to the details of where they'll come from. Now, in the overall context of United States government spending, what you're seeing is the military is about 20% of overall, including mandatory entitlement spending, and yet they're subject to 50% of the cuts if there's no agreement. You know the Democrats are going to come in and they're going to say that we need, quote-unquote, revenue enhancement. Mm-hmm. We know what that means. It means taxes to real people. And so the commission, if it deadlocks, goes into automatic cuts, and what happens is the military, in a time of war, winds up bearing far more of its share, and I cannot support that.
Representative Thaddeus McCotter with us on the morning meeting this morning. I don't mean to be simplistic or alarmist, but when I see that $2.4 trillion has been cut over 10 years, immediately I say, okay, that's about $240 billion a year, which is less than 20% of the rate that we're increasing our spending over and above the projected limit. This doesn't seem like much of a cut at all.
No, I don't think you're being alarmist at all. I think you're being realistic in viewing it, as most Americans do. You're going to, if you put it in terms of your own household, if you said to someone that I need to have an increase and we need to raise the limit on my credit card right now for a year to $2 trillion, but I promise over the next 10 years I'll cut $2 trillion out of my spending, you wouldn't get it. They wouldn't give it to you.
One of the things that concerns me is the fact that we're talking about not only raising the debt ceiling now, but raising it again. You know, I mean, there's going to be the second tranche or whatever we're terming it as. If we're planning on raising the debt ceiling again, does that not mean we're planning to continue spending at a rate that would require us to raise the debt ceiling again?
Well, you're absolutely right. The reason they raise the debt ceiling is because spending is going to go up, and the debt's going to get larger.
At what point are we actually going to get? Because with that in mind, then we aren't being serious. I don't care how much folks in Congress, folks in the Senate, wherever, talk about we're going to cut spending, et cetera. If we're not, we're not.
Well, the argument they're going to make is that the committee has the ability to go into entitlement reform. My argument back to that is it's a 6-6 committee. It'll be an evenly balanced committee. And what will happen is the Democrats will come in demanding tax increases, knowing that if a deadlock occurs, you go into the automatic cuts where the military gets hit the hardest in a time of war. And they've already walled off certain things in the automatic cuts that can't be touched: Social Security, Medicaid, military and civil pay, veterans benefits, as well as within Medicare itself. They've walled off much of that.
You've already mentioned that you're not going to be voting for this bill. Over the weekend, you took to the floor, and you're sometimes very hard to get a read on, Congressman. You either excoriated or encouraged your party factions to get together. How are we supposed to take that message?
Well, it comes from the simple premise that we've learned throughout history that where your opponent is united and you are divided, you are defeated. And we saw all last week where we had incidents where the Tea Party were considering such stalwart conservatives as Colonel Allen West to be no longer conservative because of one vote that didn't make law. And then you saw Republicans continue to dismiss some of the concerns of the Tea Party in terms of what we've been talking about. And my point to both is that I know you're not the same party, but you do have common goals. And the harder it is for you to unite, the easier it is for the left to win. And so that's what I was trying to make the point of. They need better communication. They need more realistic goals between each other and to work together to get to that effect, rather than simply allowing the media to continue to paint both as ineffectual, divided, and in the Tea Party sense, the worst thing that could happen is to be marginalized by the mainstream media and have the Republican Party try to facilitate that.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, I don't think we would be having any of this debate. I mean, maybe to a certain extent, but not on the level that we've had it not been for some of the folks that were elected as quote-unquote Tea Party members or Tea Party people, whatever you want to refer to them as, before we sent those freshmen to office. And not all of them are Tea Partiers, but a lot of them I think would identify with at least the principles. Before we sent them to office, we would have just raised this without even talking about it.
Well, I think you've always had stalwart conservatives like Mike Pence and other people in the caucus, but you're right, the Tea Party played a very important role, as we've all noted, in revitalizing the Republican Party with new members. But the question then becomes, it's a question of, is every single vote going to be the one that then all of a sudden, like Allen West, is one of the very people you're talking about?
Right.
Is now he all of a sudden, because he moved the process along, going to be considered no longer conservative and a rhino?
Yeah.
And to me, that strikes me again, that does both the party and both the Tea Party and the Republican Party a disservice, because it causes consternation when everybody looks at Allen West as a great, enormous amount of esteem for him and knows that he's measured in the totality of his service to this country, not even just in Congress and certainly not for one vote.
Considering that Republicans, and we'll leave the word conservative off of this for a second, but considering that Republicans control only the House out of the House, Senate, and presidency, is it enough of a victory for them to have raised the profile of this issue, begun this debate, and made this little victory toward cuts? Or should they be trying to leverage more, even though they seem to only control a third of the argument?
Well, as you guys have rightly noted, this debate's been engaged, and it's been elevated throughout the country by the American people. So what you have is, you cannot tell me that because of this bill, all of a sudden people are thinking about spending in debt. Right. That's what the 2010 election was about, and even before then, after the imposition of Obamacare on an unwilling majority of the population. So what I'm concerned about is the fact that you're going to get a bill, and you're going to wind up with this process at the end of it, which is going to pop up in October, November, could potentially pop up in December, depending on what happens, whereby the people who support this are surprised to find the conundrum in which they find themselves.
Yeah, well, we're going to be right back there again pretty darn quick, I think, regardless of, well, not regardless of, but in most instances, I think we'll be right back where we are very soon. So,
and the only change would be is that if they can't agree, the automatic cuts take place.
Yeah.
And the military gets it.
It's a frightening situation. I've got to be honest. Before we had you on, I was a little bit more optimistic about the current deal, but
well, thanks for that.
Not so much. But
yeah, right.
It's all good though. Okay, so where do we go from here? Because tomorrow is that drop dead deadline, and the country's going to implode if we don't raise the debt ceiling. My assumption is that we will raise they will go with this current deal regardless of a few no votes. But unless you're hearing something different, is the House going to vote this thing through?
Well, this is by no means a done deal. And I would argue the most realistic thing to do, at least to get Republicans to support it, is to carve off the automatic sequestration if the committee deadlocks. Mm-hmm. Because if you want this thing done, what you need it done by is elected representatives without the automatic fallback that favors one side over the other, because that guarantees a deadlock. So I would think that that's the most practical thing that can happen now. Whether it will or not, we'll find out. We're going to conference at 12:30 as Republicans. But the Dems don't like it. As you know, Speaker Boehner said we got 98% of what we wanted, which leaves me to wonder, are we going to get 2% of the Democrats to vote for it?
Right. Yeah.
So it's a very tricky situation here. And I think, again, as a realistic person, you have to address that commission and that automatic sequestration and try to level that playing field on behalf of the American taxpayers to get real entitlement reform.
You mentioned Speaker Boehner. Where are you on his leadership through this?
Oh, he's my friend. I think he's doing the best he can under difficult circumstances, and it's up to his friends and the members of the caucus to point out where we think it can be improved. And he's always been receptive to that. Now, that doesn't mean that we vote for what he puts forward, but it's certainly, you have to have respect for somebody who's going up against Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Barack Obama every single day.
Before we let you go, we're talking with Congressman Thaddeus McCotter this morning from Michigan. He's also a presidential candidate, and I realize this has kind of pulled you out of the game, at least for, for a few days. There's some important things going on, obviously, in Washington, D.C., that you got to do your job. So, but where do things stand with that? How's the campaign trail?
Well, it's affected Ron, it's affected Michelle. We're the three that vote on this, one way or the other. And so I had to miss smart girl politics, but again, they're smart. Just call them smart girl politicians for a reason, as they understood they need us here doing our job. I've had to miss Iowa events. I was going to give a key economic speech, the Greater Des Moines Partnership. Bills will have to be rescheduled. But this is something that directly affects the country, so how it affects me is irrelevant.
Sure. But as far as the campaign trail, though, you soldier on, and the Iowa caucuses are coming up in a few weeks, really. I think just a couple weeks away. So we'll see you up there in Sean. You good?
Yep, straw poll time coming up.
Straw poll is coming up, so we'll see you up there. And Congressman Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan, we do appreciate your time,
Thank
as
you,
always.
Congressman.
Thanks, guys. Bye.